The title of the message today is The Peril of Unbelief. And there are many different aspects we could look at the consequences of a lack of faith. Really, it applies to every area of our life because everything hangs on your belief. Every decision that you make, every thing that you do, all the way down to the things that we think, the way we think about life and the situations around us hangs on what you believe. And what you believe will dictate what you do. But the area I want to focus on today is that the devil seeks to destroy us with lies, but God is true. And again, that applies to a lot of different areas, but I kind of want to focus on some of the subtler aspects of it than some of the more obvious ones. And we'd like to start in John chapter 8. Chapter 8 and verse 44. Jesus is speaking of the devil here when he says, "He was a murderer from the beginning, and he does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. Whenever he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own nature, for he is a liar and the father of lies." And I thought that was kind of impactful when I read that this week, that there's not a single bit of truth in him. Everything he speaks is a lie. There is no truth found in him, and he invented lies. And we know that the word says his mission is to steal, to kill, and to destroy. And we know that he hates us, and we know that he hates the Lord. So in all his dealings with us, he's trying to destroy us. And you can look on many different times in your life through struggles and trials or different lies that you found yourself believing before and see in retrospect that his end game was your destruction. We find that we have, as humans, we have destructive tendencies much of the time, and all of those tendencies are based on lies, and that's his main battle is deception. Like, that's the way he wins. It's not through any truth. He doesn't come and say anything true to you. He comes with lies, and if you look at the impact, and there are countless examples. If you go to the very beginning with himself, he fell into wickedness and to sin based on lies he created in and of himself. He thought that he could ascend to the throne. He could be above the Lord, that he could do a better job himself. He was full of pride. He didn't see it rightly. He didn't see the truth that everything that he had, the Lord blessed him with, that God was good to him, but he thought that he was something in and of himself. You look at just immediately after that in history, the beginning of mankind with the garden. We had a utopia in every sense of the word, Adam and Eve did, and more than that. They had a perfect fellowship and intimacy with the Lord. They didn't have to toil. There was no sweat. There was no suffering. They had no shame, perfect relationship with one another. And all it took is just some doubt, a lie from a serpent to suggest that God does not have your best interest at heart. He's not as good as he says that he is. You could do better. You could be like him. And they believe that lie, and then we have destruction for all mankind to the very end without the grace of the Lord. And I don't think we'll turn there, but in Matthew 19, we see this rich young ruler that comes to Jesus. And we see that he sees value in Jesus because he comes to him. He knows that he's good. He knows he's a good teacher. I think he knows he's where eternal life stems from, because he asked him, "What must I do? What more must I do to be perfect, to obtain eternal life?" And Jesus tells him, "You must keep the commandments." And then he says, "I've done these things." And then he tells him, if you really want to be lacking nothing, sell all that you have and give to the poor and come follow me. And we see that at the end, this young ruler believes the lie from the devil that his wealth will satisfy him, will make him happy, because he goes away sad that he can't give it up. He can't give it up and follow Jesus, when the truth in that situation is, what's more valuable than Jesus? But he chose to believe a lie that his goods, that earthly happiness and comfort here would be better than following Jesus, be better than obtaining eternal life. And then even Jesus himself was tempted with lies. He didn't succumb to them because he is the truth. He kept himself, we'll turn there to Matthew chapter 4, kept himself grounded in his Father's word day in and day out. Was his thought. Matthew chapter 4, and we'll read 1 through 11. It says, "Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And after he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he then became hungry. And the tempter came and said to him, 'If you are the Son of God, command that these stones become bread.'" And you hear that? If you are the Son of God. You would think that is a ridiculous thing to say to Jesus. You would think that Jesus knows, which he does, exactly who he is, and that wouldn't be a legitimate temptation. But the devil's no idiot. He's very wise, and he has a pretty good read on us and on where our weaknesses are. And I would think that we don't know in his thoughts inside his head, but if you look at the account of Jesus' life, how many times he was attacked with, "Well, you're an illegitimate son. Who is your father?" That was probably something he had to struggle with, to maintain the truth that I am from my Father. He sent me here. I'm his. He loves me. I imagine that was probably one of the things he had to struggle with, because the devil knows that, and he attacks him here with it twice, and Jesus answers with the word. And then a second time, the devil took him into the holy city and had him stand on the pinnacle of the temple and said, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written." And he tempts him to believe a lie, just a little bit of doubt that maybe he's not who he says he is. And if that's the case, then what is he doing here? Why is he suffering? What is all of this for? And Jesus, knowing who he is, I'm sure it was a temptation to prove him wrong. Like, you know what? I can jump off of this, and I'm not going to have any trouble with that. And then the third time, the devil takes him to a very high mountain, and he showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory, and he said to him, "All these things I will give to you if you fall down and worship me," basically tempting him to short-circuit this process, and you don't have to suffer. You could take an easier route and not have to go through what you've come to go through. Let's look at John chapter 14 and verse 6. And Jesus says, "I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father but through me." We know that. We believe that. Most of us, none of us here would have any disagreement over that. And it sounds like a simple enough thing to believe, but how many times do we find ourselves believing a lie? How many times do we find ourselves disagreeing with the Lord in an anxiety or a fear or a worry about something, or choosing a sin over his word, what he says? I mean, it happens over and over and over again. And, it's not that we're supposed to feel condemned about that. The point is spend time recognizing it, the subtle things that the devil brings against us that causes us to fall, so that we can fight back with the truth, because we have Jesus living in us. And just to go through some not simple, but some quick examples, you could go on and on and on. But some subtle things that kind of pervade our thoughts, I think, a lot of people, and there are more. But something like, I have to perform, and I have to be perfect in order to be good enough, to be loved, to be accepted. Or something like, if I fail, God will reject me. When you realize the weight of your sin, and maybe you feel that I've gone too far, I've messed up too much, how could God love me now? And this one kind of hit home with me very recently, is that good Christians don't battle fear, sadness, or anger. And I know that we hear these things and immediately we're like, well, that's not true. But we don't always recognize how this is showing up in our life. Like, I'm very familiar with the fact that David prayed that he wanted to die, that he felt like, he was just swimming in tears all night long. And Jesus, felt to the point of death in his time before the cross, and Job was miserable. So we know that Christians, faithful men, have battled with these things, but I find myself sometimes with a very unrealistic expectation of myself, a lie that if I feel like I'm not handling stress very well, if I feel like I'm buckling under pressure, or falling apart emotionally at the seams, that I'm failing, and that's just not true. That's a lie from the devil, that we find ourselves kind of burdened with things like this that we don't recognize. They're so subliminal. They're so at the heart of the way we think about everything that's formed in our formative years and early childhood, and it shapes and colors the way we look at all sorts of things. And it's important that we spend some time kind of seeking out to recognize the lies that the devil would destroy us with, because even if it's not dealt with eventually, and it's not that we can get all this right in a week, it's not that you can take this week and find every lie the devil has planted and just deal with it all, it's all gone. It's a lifelong process. But in the end, if you follow a lie to the end, it's destruction. And we'll look at John chapter 3 to finish here. Very end of the chapter, starting in verse 31. And this is, the ammo that we have against the lies when we find them, when we recognize them. Chapter 3 and verse 31 says, "He who comes from above is above all, and he who is of the earth is from the earth and speaks of the earth. He who comes from heaven is above all. And what he has seen and heard, of that he testifies, and no one receives his testimony. He who has received his testimony has set his seal to this, that God is true." And obviously we're talking about Jesus here. And I heard someone talking about this week, and the way they put it really struck me, is that there's a very big difference between opinion and testimony. And we live in a culture now that's gotten really skewed with, it's the highest insult to lift any idea above anyone else's opinion, that it's so offensive that what you say might be more important than what I say. And you have these safe zones where, you just can't even speak because people are going to cry about it. But we also all distinctly know the difference between what a testimony is and an opinion. Like in the court of law, when you testify, when you are a witness of what you have seen and what you heard, it's not an opinion, it's a fact. It's you just recounting something that's true. And Jesus came not with an opinion. What he says is not maybe just a better way. It is the way, it is the truth. And so when he comes from heaven, when he comes from above, somewhere that he has seen and heard things, it says he speaks the words of God. He is testifying to what he has seen and heard. So there's no question when the devil brings a lie, doesn't matter what it is, there's a truth from Jesus that directly contradicts that, and there's just no dispute about which one is right. And so it's just a matter of discerning and then deciding to agree with the Lord. Because if we don't have faith in him and what he says, and I know that we do, it's just that when we choose a sin over what the Lord has said, we're believing a lie that sin is fulfilling somehow, that what God says is not wrong. We're not thinking that consciously, but at the heart of the decision, that's what happens. And it's the height of insult to someone, and especially to the Lord, to disbelieve them. Because when we believe doubt, when we let the fear and the anxiety have its place and overrun us, when we let the devil have his way with thoughts like that, it's us telling the Lord that, well, what you say is not right. I can't count on what you're saying. This is worth worrying over. And that impugns his character. For you to testify to me that you went to the store and found this sale on this rifle I really wanted, and it's a $1,400 gun, and you tell me they marked it down to $399, and it's unbelievable, you have to go get it, and I tell you, there's no way that's true, I just don't believe it. If you're my friend, if you're someone that ought to believe what you say, that would insult you. I would be calling you a liar, that I don't believe you. And, so far be it from us to ever call the Lord a liar. So at the end of it, let's just be faithful to seek out the weaknesses that we have where we fall, and kind of take some soul searching and some thought to see really what's at the root of it, what's behind it, what lie has the devil planted that's driving this decision, and then instead believe the one whom we have dwelling in us that testifies of truth. Hallelujah.